health and wellness. And right around that same time, I started watching football on television and kind of fell in love with that. And so for the next number of years, that became my drive, my motivation, my passion was weightlifting and football. And to one day playing the NFL. That was my drive. And lo and behold, I was scouted my senior year in college, a small college in northern Minnesota. They recognized me when they were scouting our quarterback, Mark Reed, who ended up backing up Phil Simms for the New York Giants for 4 years. That's how they found me. And so I was training for that. When some of my buddies got involved in wrestling, I'm like, hey, that's exciting and great for you. And one of them was Road Warrior Animal, who randomly called me out of the blue one day and said, hey, what do you think about wrestling? I think you're doing great. He's like, no, what do you think? I mean, you mean like actually being one? And so he told me the whole storyline, Charlotte, North Carolina, Jim Crockett Promotions, Ivan Koloff, nephew, Olympics, this whole story. And so I made a 5-minute phone call, sight unseen. No, that's not the days you take a snapshot on your phone and send it off, a picture. It was just an unseen conversation, 5 minutes, and made sure Jim Crockett knew I had no amateur wrestling background, 0 professional training. I'd never hit a ring rope. And he said he understood that. And I said, well, what's the next step? He said, well, be in my office with your head shaved bald on such and such a date. I said, that's it? He goes, that's it. I go, see you then. Never had another conversation with him. Just showed up the day he said to be there.
Wow. So to Bill's real point, is it too late for him?
Is it? Never too late. It's never too late. There's all kinds of schools and camps now.
But real quick, just a point, Chet, just so you need to, I don't know if you knew this, because I just found it out. His boys, are they watching?
Yeah, should
they
be.
better be.
Yeah.
They better not be in bed. They better be watching.
They're watching, yeah.
Well, you may or may not know this. They're huge Rocky fans. Yeah. Nikita you tried out for Rocky 4 and went out there and had a screen test with Sylvester Stallone.
Yeah, I did, and there's a whole lot more to that story. It's pretty funny. It came down to Dolph Lundgren and myself as to who would get that role, and there's more to that story. And I don't know if we have time to tell it tonight, but there is more to that story.
Yeah, we're gonna bring you back. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah.
I was just gonna piggyback a little bit on Mark earlier. So, kind of we grew up in the mid '80s. We're teenagers, so that '85, '86 kind of started. Wrestling seemed to boom when Hulk Hogan was in Rocky 3. Did a nationwide boom after that, and so by the mid '80s, it was you guys, Road Warriors, Rock and Roll Express, Four Horsemen, and that rock and roll lifestyle that you had to be involved. You kind of shared a little bit about that. I guess my question was like, what event or events in that lifestyle began to shift you at some point towards the path that you ended up on now?
Well, it's a great question, and again, not my focus, not my center of attention, and really. The short answer to that story is once I walked away from wrestling under my own terms. So as unusual as the way I broke in, I think you got one more question or part 2 of that question. But as unusual, I walked away under my own terms. I've been coined kind of the Barry Sanders of pro wrestling. For the football fan out there, you'll understand that. And so I was in a season of time in 1993 when I was like, okay, I've climbed the pinnacle of success, world champion, travel around the world, all that. But I say it this way: I was successful, but I was unfulfilled. And it was on that quest, on that journey that year to find what's next for Nikita Koloff. And little did I know, lo and behold, what was next was an encounter with Jesus, and that would change everything.
Which you'll hear about June 20th, which is why you need to be here.
You'll hear more. Bill, you had something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, were there any when you were wrestling? Were there any of the other wrestlers or people in that industry who did love Jesus, who you kind of watched them or planted seeds, or was it like I didn't know another believer in the wrestling industry?
There was one, didn't really hang out with him or have any conversations with him. There was one I knew of. His name was George South. George South. You always knew George was on the card or in the building because there was what we might know as, or what some out there might know as, a track. a salvation tract, a little store, one of those like in the bathroom stall. You're like, oh, George has been here again. Oh man, So, the only talk of Jesus was probably not in a very good light. Let's just put it that way. If his name came up, it wasn't used usually very respectfully. But George, to my knowledge, as I think back, would have really been the only one that I knew was a Jesus follower, or what I might have even called back then a Jesus freak. Oh, DC talk. No, anyway, but.
All right, well, we're getting near our end of our time. You're going to have to promise to come back. We're going to have you back even beyond the 20th. And maybe
June 20th,
you got to beyond the 20th. We're going to do
in-house.
this again.
I need to come back in-house,
yes,
right?
And a question and answer. You got to bring Lex Luger with you. But let's close it down with some of this. Let's do some rapid fire for 5 minutes. So, quick question, quick answer. We don't have to go into details, but if you could pick one, I want to be in the ring with one guy. Who are you going to pick that you've wrestled against? Your favorite person to wrestle?
That just anyone, or that I wrestled against?
That you wrestled against. You go, and when I wrestle that guy, that's the best. We put on the best show.
Magnum TA.
Okay, one guy you never got a chance to wrestle that you wish you had.
Hulk Hogan.
Who's the best athlete you ever wrestled against?
Great question. Best athlete. Boy, there were several. Dr. Des Steve Williams.
Were you ever around Andre the Giant?
Yes, we never stepped in the ring against each other or with each other, but we crossed paths numerous times in our profession, airports, coliseums, and those sorts of
Do you regret never getting to body slam him?
Or trying. Yeah, right.
Oh, boss.
Yeah.
Only if he lets you.
Oh, I was going to say, when Hulk Hogan did it, he had a lot of help from Andre.
Andre was in agreement on that one.
Yeah, right.
So, okay. Greatest, in your opinion, greatest in-ring wrestler of all time? I got my top two.
It's a toss-up between, as far as guys I was in the ring, it's a toss-up between Ric Flair and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat.
Okay, that's good. My top three were Flair, Steamboat, and Shawn Michaels.
What's your impression of Dusty Rhodes and kind of his leadership?
That ain't no quick question. All right, you got to go quick answer then. All right, that's a good question though.
Well, the shortest answer is genius. There's the short answer. He was genius, a creative, 2 words, creative genius.
Hey, this probably never happened to you, but were you, because sometimes when we get going, like, you start to get a little tripped up and just, because it's funny, were you ever in an interview situation with somebody where you had to catch yourself to not come out of character?
Oh, interviews and sometimes matches. The redneck Dick Murdoch was infamous at making you laugh. Even if he wasn't trying, we used to call him Foghorn Leghorn, like from the cartoon. He could make you laugh. I'd bite turnbuckles so I wouldn't laugh, because I want to stay in character. I'm
what
like,
about
stop it.
when Ric Flair that time was telling Ivan, "You can come work. I'll make you work for me," and all that kind. And that was pretty good too. Ric Flair. What about? Okay, here's Ric Flair. Well, if I say Ric Flair, what do you say in terms of wrestling?
Consummate professional.
Okay.
That's good.
Your greatest, what you would consider your greatest wrestling moment in the ring, or your favorite, one of your favorite. I know you can't tear it down to one, but one of.
I'll give it'll be a short answer, but I'm going to give 3 because they all happen in the Charlotte Coliseum. Well, in
Old
Charlotte.
Coliseum.
Old Coliseum, Independence. 2 in there. You already referenced one, Memorial, Great American Bash, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Only 13 months in the business, wrestling for the World Heavyweight title. Magnum TA, best of 7, number 7 in the old Charlotte Coliseum on Independence. And seeing the light and becoming the superpowers with Dusty Rhodes also in the Charlotte, the night I turned in the cage against Ole Anderson and J.J. Dillon, coming to Dusty's aid.
What about the strongest guy you've been in the ring with?
Barbarian would definitely be one of them. The man from Tonga. My raw power. The most reckless of power was Van Vader.
Yeah, was there a guy that before you get in the ring, you go, there's a real good chance, even though we're not trying, I'm going to get hurt tonight?
Well,
would that be Vader? Or?
Well, Vader was one that I limited the moves. Like,
you didn't trust. You didn't trust, right?
Well, trust is a big factor. That'll preach in there, but trust is a big factor in that business. The guy's driving your head into a mat, in a pile driver, you have to trust. But there were certain moves, like, for example, with him, that I said, you do that another guy, that ain't happening with the Russian Nightmare, my friend. We'll work around that one.
Right. Okay. And that's, so like, just real quick, with the David Crockett thing, I was at least old enough to begin to realize, okay, some of this may be scripted, but I don't care what anybody says. When you get elbow dropped or sickled, even if it's in the script, that's just about as real as it still feels real. When Animal catches you coming off the top rope, okay, so how much is, like, before a match, how much do y'all talk about it, or how much of it is as we go along? Because that's where you say some guys were real good at that.